Namaskar, Jai Hind, Jai Bharat, and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Aadi. Indian Air Force, बोलते हैं ना छुपा रुस्तम, literally. And a lot of people had कितना criticism कि भाई Air Force कुछ नहीं कर पाएगी, चाइना है, मल्टी डोमेन वॉरफेयर है, ये है, वो है, ड्रोन आ जाएंगे तो हम क्या करेंगे? Whole lot of questions were asked. इंडियन एयरफोर्स ने 4 दिन के अंदर, वो 4 दिन छोड़ो यार, 80 घंटे के अंदर, in 80 hours, I think the Indian Air Force responded to every question that was raised on it since 2000. To answer some more questions, I have with me Marshal Diptendu Choudhury, sir. He is going to tell us कि भाई ऑपरेशन सिंदूर में इंडियन एयरफोर्स ने क्या क्या करा. What all do we need to understand about the Indian Air Force? यार हमको जो चीजें नहीं पता. And can we do this again and again and again? सबसे बड़ा सवाल तो यही है कि हम ये चीज आगे आगे कर सकते हैं. क्या हमारी अभी प्रिपेयर्डनेस रहेगी for the next level with China? Sir जी, नमस्कार. Thank you so much for the time, sir. And firstly, the honor of being an Air Force child, and you being servant in the Air Force as well, the pride that we feel today, and जो चीज हमको अंदर से पता थी, पब्लिक को नहीं थी, आज पब्लिक को दिखी है. How do you feel, sir?
Thank you, Aadi, and Dev Talks के दर्शकों को मेरा नमस्कार. Good morning to everybody. It's wonderful to be with Dev Talks, and it's something which is a brand name which I had heard of long before. So it's nice to be back on it. Nice to be on your channel for the first time, in fact, and I think on a show of sir, which you are saying that you have hit some 500,000 hits.
Yes,
that's fantastic. So great. That I think, Adi, the topic which you have brought up and the way you put it across, you have actually asked a question to which the IAF has been dying to answer. बहुत देर से. The IAF for a long time, and I'm not. People say no, don't do the what? Play the victim card and all. It's nothing to do with the victim card. The fact is, the IAF has in India, Hindustan, the IAF has always been the least understood and least exploited service in the larger national interest and national security. और ये मैं क्यों बोलता हूँ? It's an important thing. We'll discuss all this along the way. So this is the place where I come from and why it is important. That's why ये जरूरत है कि आपके दर्शकों को सब ये समझ में आना चाहिए कि एयर पावर कहाँ से किस पोजीशन लेता है एक देश के सिक्योरिटी में और क्या क्या करती है. तो हम we tend to look at air power from a very narrow perspective. कि air power is all about fighters and pilots wearing Ray-Bans, dog fights, World War II के बड़ा रोमांटिक सा पिक्चर, रोमांचक सा एक वो इमेज होता है, बट रियलिटी तो वो है नहीं एकदम. और ये रियलिटी क्योंकि एयरफोर्स, मैं ये नहीं कहता हूँ कि हर एक सर्विस का एक अलग जज्बा हो, बट एयरफोर्स में इट्स अ लिटिल डिफरेंट बिकॉज फर्स्ट एंड फॉरमोस्ट इट इज अ गेम which has it is a dangerous game.
Yes,
in the sense that military aviation is inherently dangerous. जैसे बोलते हैं ना, military aviation and Formula 1 racing are the probably two most dangerous professions in the world. ये तो सही है. And I mean, all of us are we are lucky to be where we are. I mean, we have lost so many friends along the way, and not in wars. So this is the reality of it. So Air Force, because of this reality, is always very focused on its operations day to day. तो इसको जरा एयरफोर्स को टू लुक एट एयर पावर इन अ बिगर पिक्चर हम ज्यादा करते नहीं. तो ये हमारी शॉर्टकमिंग है एयरफोर्स की, विच इज अ फैक्ट. सो एयरफोर्स हैज ऑलवेज बीन लुक्ड एट स्पॉइलर, या दे आर डूइंग देयर थिंग्स देयर ओन वे. there's a very reason for it. And it is nothing to do with the color of the uniform. It is all to do with the content of the service and its role. So for the Air Force, हमारे लिए technology is a big thing, and it keeps changing very rapidly. तो ये technology assisted जो change होता है, that means every few years your weapons are improving in capability, in skilling power, in the ranges of engagement. इस सब change के साथ comes a change in operational capability of that weapon. That weapon capability is constantly expanding. तो इससे क्या होता है, वी हैव टू कॉन्स्टेंटली चेंज आवर कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ ऑपरेशंस, ऑफ हाउ वी एम्प्लॉय these absorb and employ these technological changes best in the implementation of air power के rules. तो इससे होता क्या है, हमारे जो डॉक्ट्रिन्स हैं, टैक्टिक्स हैं, कॉन्सेप्ट्स हैं, दे चेंज वेरी रैपिडली. देखिए मेरे लाइफ में ही, सिंस द टाइम आई जॉइंड द एयर फोर्स 40 years plus ago, I was trained in gun combat, where aircraft fought each other with guns. And we had to come to gun kill ranges of 300 meters to shoot down another aircraft. Within few years, we went to close combat missiles. The range increased to 2 to 3 kilometers. Then we went to all aspect infrared missiles, which could be fired from the front. Suddenly, the range expanded to 6 to 8 kilometers. Then we came to semi-active BVR missiles, 12, 20 kilometers. Active BVR, 20, 80, now going to 100, 200 kilometers. So within my life only, I've seen so many changes. That is why we've seen so many doctrinal changes. I've seen changes in tactics.
जी.
This rapid change makes it difficult for air power to be understood. हमें ही मुश्किल होता है to keep up with it, let alone a non-practitioner. So the other services in the civil street, it is very difficult to grasp air power, what it does. तो याद वही रहता है, तो वही फाइटर पायलट इन रोमांस.
नहीं, वो भी that is also a big part of it. The romance is also a big part of it. Sir, ये पहला 7 तारीख को स्ट्राइक किया, इसके अंदर it was a very focused strike, and the concept of air pass is जब आप offensive operation करते हैं, आप पहले उनका air defense हटाते हो and then you go inside and do what you want to. हमने वो नहीं करा. We went with active air defense. And we basically hit 9, 10, 11, 12, 9 locations, multiple strikes. Drones ke saath, there are images of drone warfare, drones dropping bombs, there are images of fighters, doing stuff. Like multi-pronged approach with a huge contingent. Sir, iske andar, what would have been the challenges coming across? Ki kya-kya cheezein aapko karni padengi? And apart from the main thing is, द टारगेट सिलेक्शन. तो ये तो टारगेट सिलेक्शन के बारे में तो खैर बहुत बारी बोल चुके हैं कि 2008 के बाद जब हमारे पास मुंबई में हुआ था तभी भी रेडी थे, 2001 में भी रेडी थे, पुलवामा में रेडी थे, बालाकोट में ऑफ कोर्स किया और के लिए रेडी थे. हाउ डू यू सस्टेन समथिंग लाइक दिस विद एन एयरफोर्स लाइक आवर्स? कैसे करते हैं ये?
अभी इट्स यू आस्क्ड बोलते ना many in one question. ठीक है, तो I'll give you several answers to make sense of the entire sequence of your thought process. So let's start with the fact that that we hit a terror target in peacetime. तो ये तो हमने देख लिया था कि ये पहली बार नहीं है that air power has been used against terror. But हिंदुस्तान में air power to be used against external terror, Balakot was the first. But Balakot itself, bolte na, it was a big jump. It was a decision taken by the political leadership to do this act. कि peace time में अंदर जाके inside the adversary's territory to hit and strike a target for punitive signaling that terror is unacceptable at the scale it came. We did not hit any other target. It was a very clear, precise, punitive strike. Two effects. One is, आजकल ना people throw this word बड़े easily, deterrence. People are saying, no, that didn't make any difference. See, they have attacked again. Yes, deterrence is not a permanent affair. ऐसे दुश्मनों के साथ एक बार कर लो, उसका कोई गारंटी नहीं है कि वो बंद हो जाएगा. आज तक तो हुआ नहीं. 1947 से चल रहा है पाकिस्तान के साथ. 47 में हुआ, 65, same thing. Every time it ended ki peace. We always held back. Always we have held back when we could have done more. But we have done it in the larger interest of peace. But वो तो change हुआ नहीं. So इस बार भी जो किए हैं, it's no guarantee of change, but it is a very different thing we have done इस बार. इस बार पिछली बार तो एक punitive message था. इस बार ये बात अलग हो गई. बोलते ना रेड लाइन की बात हो गई. कि वो लक्ष्मण रेखा क्रॉस हो चुका है। आपने पिछली बार छुआ था लक्ष्मण रेखा को, इस बार तो क्रॉस ही कर दिया आपने, बस खत्म। पुराने डिस्कशंस, पुराने ख्यालात, पुराने रिस्ट्रेंट और नहीं। So it's a very bold step. So if you look at it, from Balakot probably was the first, but after Balakot, please understand, आप जो बोल रहे थे कि दिन में गए उनके एक्टिव रेडार था, after Balakot the option of surprise of such an operation is gone forever, because having reacted in Balakot and now having reacted again in Op Sindoor, even in Op Sindoor they were prepared. They knew we will hit back. So this is a big thing. So that means the strategy in your game plan, strategy में आपके tactics जो plan कर रहे हैं उसमें surprise तो रहा ही नहीं. They know कब आएगा exactly, timing की बात है, but they are prepared. Their air defense is active and active on overdrive after having learned the Balakot lessons. Because the fact is the first mission went in clean. उसको तो पकड़ा नहीं. When he hit the target, that went through clean with their AD active. So they've learned the lessons. So surprise is no longer, surprise of time का advantage रहा नहीं. तो उस पे हमने क्या किया? We replaced it with surprise of scale. 9 targets, there were 21 targets which is known. That means 21 target की तो planning हो चुकी होगी. Everything. It would have been factored in. We could have as well have hit 21 targets. That means that is the level of the scale. But we chose to do probably 9 based on some degree of management of scale and the correct amount of message going in, and obviously based on hardcore real-time intelligence कि उस टाइम क्या कर रहा होगा. So that would have defined this choices. आपने पूछा था टारगेट सिलेक्शन के बारे में, बट इस टारगेट में देखिए सब टारगेट्स अलग अलग थे. Some buildings, so construction of each target was different. Range of the target from the border is different. So each target would have needed a separate kind of target appreciation and selection, the right weapons. So there are a lot of planning which has gone in. Strike जहाज जाएगा, उसके एयर डिफेंस के लिए ये जाएगा, उसके इलेक्ट्रॉनिक वॉरफेयर के लिए ये जाएगा, एवैक जाएगा. There will be decoys, there will be support elements, there will be air defense elements churning. So it is operation at an enormous scale, and it is not easy to plan for such an operation overnight. So, but the fact that the Air Force had factored in their, I keep showing this book, their doctrine, and this doctrine catered for a chapter of no war, no peace. Air strategy, no war, no peace. उसमें ये दोनों चीजें हैं. So that is the important thing. That what is most important is that the Air Force had factored and gamed this in. Air Force had planned and prepared with what it had and what it has to game this in. Yes, there would be limitations. There would be enormous challenges, but we pulled it off successfully, and that is full credit to not to me or veterans like us, but the professionals on the ground whose job it is, which they are doing silently and quietly. So the difference which I'm trying to make and point I'm trying to make, that the Air Force was not surprised. What is new is to the other services and to the nation as a whole. Look, it's a different kind of warfare. Because frankly, the last war we fought, serious conventional war, was 1971.
Yeah.
Usme air power was unrestrained, full-fledged employment of air power. But air power in 1947, in 1962 तो employ नहीं किया हमने चाइनीज के साथ. सबसे बड़ी दुख की बात वो रही that we didn't use offensive air power. शायद साउथ एशिया और एशिया का डायनामिक्स ही अलग हुआ होता. It's a big regret. 65 we were restrained. 99 we were restrained. Air power couldn't cross the border. So only time air power was given a full free hand was in 71. Even in this mission, in Sindoor, 4 days, 80 hours, what you're saying, even in this we were restrained. And naturally, because It is not war. It is just an operation against terror, which is what limited our taking out adversaries' air defense targets in peacetime.
Correct.
Our first strike was a hand behind, tied behind your back strike for the IAF.
That's
There is
the
no denying it.
that's the thing, sir, because आप literally रोक के अपने आप को कर रहे हो, and जो मेन डॉक्ट्रिन है कि भाई पहले एयर डिफेंस निकालो, किक द एयर डिफेंस फर्स्ट, किल इट ऑफ, क्रिएट एयर सुपीरियोरिटी, फिर जाके जो करना है करो आप वहां पर. आप तो
No, I agree, Adi. But the fine nuance here is, and that is the important part. The fine nuance here is to understand that because it was a strike technically in peacetime, and we were striking only terror targets, and we did not wish to hit its military, we did not hit their PF targets, which by all logic in a conventional operation we would have done. I mean, that would have been the first reaction. But this is a constraint of employment of air power in peacetime by a country which still adheres to normative world order के जो नियम कानून है, हम वो अभी भी लेके चलते हैं.
that is
Even
there,
in
sir.
conflict.
Yeah, that is,
so there's a difference.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, sir. जो एयरफोर्स ने पाकिस्तान को किया है, and now specifics are coming out, एयर किल का ही काफी कुछ चल रहा है. I don't want to get into specifics, वो सब साइड करते हैं सर. But at a strategic level, 30,000 feet level, आप मुझे बताइए सर. You know, you've spent a long time in the Indian Air Force. If you were to analyze the Pakistani Air Force with the information which is available to you today, sir, where will you place its air power?
You know, the best part is that we don't have to we don't have a chance in hell of assessing Pakistani air power, because Pakistani Air Force does a fantastic job of projecting itself. Well, they have mastered this art.
Yeah.
If you read, there's a book called Fizaya by late Pushpinder Singh. It's a marvelous book written long back, I think with two other foreign authors as well. And there it talks how Pakistan's Air Force has positioned itself and is considered, what should I say, a jewel in the crown of the Pakistani military, at least by the people. The PAF is a darling of the nation, and that is how it has positioned itself. Historically, if you read and I have read their actual PAF history, written by their authors, to them, they have always, it doesn't matter what happened to the ground war, PAF has always brought victory to Pakistan. That is their standpoint. They have built on myths, on the number of kills.
Always. 65, 71, always.
They have built this myth of air supremacy, which I have not just me, a lot of people, but I have also in my writings have denounced, and not denounced, I put the facts out to readers. Please read the facts, the numbers and figures. We flew much more than them. We flew more than them, almost more than twice, और वो भी सारे मिशंस उनके टेरिटरी में. तो उनके लॉसेस और हमारे लॉसेस में तो फर्क होगा ही, बट उतना भी खास फर्क नहीं है. फॉर एग्जांपल 65, ours was 59 losses, theirs were 43 losses, when we had flown twice the amount of their flying. So their loss rate was much higher. But they will not go into this. Like, if you go by any air power assessments all over the world with professionals, it is all losses are always seen on loss rates. How much of flying have you done per loss? So the more flying you manage per loss is what your it shows to your advantage of your training and all of other factors. So anyway, but Pakistan has always had this advantage. In 65, they had a gentleman called John Frick, a British author, which interestingly, who offered to write for the Indian Air Force first, but our government, I think, didn't want foreign authors writing for us in 65. So he went and wrote for Pakistan. And obviously, he's built an image. So what happened? What the point I'm trying to make is, Pakistan itself as a nation has deep down, अंदर में international world order में US and UK has always had a soft corner for Pakistan and especially its military. This is the reality of life. So Pakistani media and authors, they always talked about the air combat skills of Pakistani Air Force based on what they have been fed by the Pakistanis. इंडियन ऑथर्स एक तो हमारे बहुत कम लिखने वाले थे, अब शुरू हुआ है. And nowadays of late we have a lot of people writing, researching, debating, talking air path.
Yes, sir.
जो पहले था, तो पुरानी बातें अब निकल रही है. 47 में क्या हुआ, 62 में क्या हुआ, 65 में क्या हुआ, 71 में क्या हुआ, कारगिल में क्या हुआ, बालाकोट में क्या हुआ. So these facts are all coming out, and along with these facts, one fact which is emerging and which is something which Indian Air Force has been क्या बोलूं, understated in, is that it did a fairly good job. We have always delivered, and इस बार भी in a kind of operation जो कहीं लिखित नहीं था, इतना तो एयरफोर्स को क्रेडिट देना होगा कि it had visualized such a situation and its employment, and that is exactly how these operations went through. So that is enormous. The problem is, जो एयरफोर्स का विजन है, it is not very well known. It is only today drones. We had killer drones, of जो बोलते हैं ना, suicide drones in our inventory for more than a decade. We have done things. Our integration of ISCCS of air defense is more than a decade old. It's tested and proven in Balakot, post-Balakot activation. Fantastic performance. It's great that the army is now plugged into it.
Yes.
So these are the improvements which will get better and better with time as the services come together. But the point जो I'm trying to make, it is not about Air Force is top this or that and this. ये कि Air Force does its things quietly.
So sir, I mean, Pakistan,
ये सबसे बड़ी बात.
हाँ, वो तो दिख रहा है, sir. Literally, I mean, honestly, when the drone started coming in, it shocked everyone. The way the air defense system worked, and जिस तरह से. So that was like, आंधे मारेंगे, this, that, that Josh was there, even in the people and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I think what really changed the game was, of course, the 9th and 10th. And जिस तरह से उसके बाद photographs आई, and when we saw those holes, and we saw that, I don't think किसी को इतना आइडिया था, in spite of the fact कि वो युद्ध अभ्यास होता है, उसके वीडियोस बनते हैं, उसके रील्स बनते हैं, सब कुछ होता है. But when we actually saw the videos that the Pakistanis were clicking, जो खींच रहे थे ये लोग और जो वीडियोस बना रहे थे, जो फोटोएं खींच रहे थे, then people started realizing, oh bloody hell, ये तो बहुत ही जबरदस्त चीज है. I think that was, तो ये एक छोटा डिस्प्ले ना हर 10-15 साल में होना चाहिए सर, मेरे हिसाब से at least.
No, interesting. As a display, I think Air Force does every alternate
Yes, sir.
year, Pokhran mein. This is firepower demonstration,
Yes,
which used to be earlier called now. And but yes, it is the first time you are seeing those are training. These are live shots.
Live shots. Sir.
But you mentioned one very interesting. I'll just take 2 minutes here.
Please, sir.
Very interesting thing that hitting this target was a surprise. Frankly, to me also it was a surprise. I mean, I was absolutely with all my thinking, didn't see it happen so quickly. But then I analyzed, and there's a reason to it. But look at how our government reacted. After the first 9 targeting, PAF was under pressure to do something. Fact of it was our air defense, and as well as their air defense had today, we have something which again I was talking about in the doctrine, offensive air defense. हमारे air defense actually का projection, जो reach होता है, पहुंच होता है, both vertically and range wise, depth wise, horizontally, is deep into enemy territory. That means पुराने ख्यालात से हम बोलते हैं ना air defense, तो defensive नहीं रहा. पुराने ख्यालात में we had to target an adversary once he crosses the border, हमारे radar की reach उतनी थी. Now I am seeing him well inside. I can shoot him down over his airspace. So air defense has actually become an offensive weapon. It forced the PAF back. So PAF's offensive capability, जो इसने काफी देर से इसने project किया हुआ था, that offensive defense capability है आजकल पाकिस्तान का, and that is the new approach. That has been proven ineffective because they have not been able to attack us. So what have they done? Lightweight drone attacks from close to the border. Few drones armed with bombs close to the border. But it has not been able to reach inside because of our air defense coverage, which was a part of the IFS and the nation's strategy in no war, no peace conditions. So इसमें important बात ये है कि once they hit our targets, notice the targets. Among civilian targets, they also hit our airfields. That was PAF's doing. To hit and create confusion and damage in our airfields to deter our Air Force from doing anything more. हमने क्या किया? When you hit an airfield, technically आपने एक military target को मारा है. Military targeting is an act of war. But हमने इस पे we again exercised restraint, gave within the escalatory ladder में हमने उसमें भी कंट्रोल करके we have hit their targets larger in number, more in number, depth and scale, but not with mass, with little targeting in each. सबके थाली में थोड़ा थोड़ा प्रसाद दिया है कि भैया ये तो स्टार्टर है, मेन कोर्स बाकी है. So I think that message went across that we could do this with impunity and we have the advantage of scale and mass behind us, which will follow. Should you now try and take this higher? That was a fantastic piece of, I think, modern day targeting. You've said, Baki log, it has changed the dynamics entirely in the world of how air power is being looked at.
Yeah.
Trust me, after a long time, Indian air power will become a center or at least the focus of study. And a lot of facts will come out. Yes, most certainly there would have been mistakes and limitations. But that's there. The fact is, outcomes it has created.
That's the fun of it.
That is the main. That is the main thing.
Yeah, having everything and getting everything is not a superb this thing. You have everything.
That doesn't guarantee military success.
It doesn't actually.
Look at the US.
It doesn't, sir. So when we look at, I wanted to actually bring this in. Everybody talks about, hamare ko fifth generation hona chahiye. And the biggest question right now is that, Pakistan is getting the J-35, fifth generation fighter. And पूरा उसके ऊपर तमाशा है कि भाई वो तो अब तो भैया इंडियन एयरफोर्स इज डन, अब तो खत्म हो जाएगा. What, see, one, is it so? That is point number one. Dusra, sir, this whole China's air force, which is, I was speaking to somebody who said कि यार Pakistani air force नहीं है, वो Chinese air force है. Please understand, you were fighting the Chinese air force and you were fighting the Turkish involvement in the Chinese air force sort of a thing. So please understand this very carefully. So I said F-16s. He said F-16s ठीक है, but please understand पूरा network तो China का है. So you are fighting that. So how do we put this battle scenario into perspective? 1 with China, 2 with Pakistan, and 3 with Turkey in terms of air power. क्योंकि they would learn something about the air force हमारे बारे में. And जो एक कहावत है, तो everybody saying यार अभी तो 10% भी नहीं यूज करा एयर फोर्स ने. Is that something that you would stand by, sir?
Okay, I'll start with the last question first. There are 3 things आपने पूछा. One is 5th generation के बारे में. दूसरा external support from China, Turkey on Pakistan, Pakistani air power, and the dynamics of these 3 countries and their relations with India vis-a-vis air power. And last one you have asked was on that we have only used about 10%. Okay. So my estimate is not even a back of the envelope calculation, but fairly involved answer to this. It is even way lesser than 10%. Okay. So Air Forces, the kind of capacity it would have, you just have to look at the maths of an exercise called Gagan Shakti conducted, I think 2019, if I'm not too wrong. 19 or so, 19 or 20, I think, 2021, yeah, 20. We flew 9,000 fighter sorties in 10 days where we didn't, see, when you plan for sorties, you plan at a certain rate. The number of sorties you will fly per aircraft. These are all figures in open domain, published open domain figures. I never talk about classified numbers. I will never talk about what I know, because I can't talk about those things. I am talking about purely numbers which you can pick off from the public domain. 9,000 sorties plus, and we didn't fly our full rate we are capable of. But so this is an enormous capacity, but is it enough when you look at adversaries? But after those 9,000 sorties, most certainly the rate would keep falling as the war extends or as a conflict extends, which is the reality of it. So it's always a challenge on the military. Where do you cap the upper end of the fight? That was always a challenge. In 65, it was a challenge because our aim was to last out the war. We had actually planned for a long duration war. Pakistan hadn't and ran into trouble. We could have easily outlasted them. So also in 71. So that is our biggest deterrent strength, which remains, that we can outlast them. There is no question in that. At the end, we will prevail. But the smart thing to do it is with as efficiently and with as less cost as possible. And that is where the real challenge lies, that when you do not have enough capacity, you are constrained. You're constrained by resources. You're constrained to fight with what you have, like you said, आपने जो शुरू में कहा है, जो है उसी के साथ लड़ें. तो ये बात हमें समझना पड़ेगा कि कैपेसिटी बहुत होता है. So that is the first question answered. Second question I will go into is your first question of 5th gen. 5th gen is a reality. हमारे Air Force, Chinese Air Force, incidentally, till Gulf War, was one of the largest air forces. It still is one of the largest air forces in the world. But the numbers were so large but they were all old platforms, 3rd generation platforms. Platforms which they had in huge numbers. They had MiG-15s, MiG-19s, MiG-21s in huge numbers, because they, as a national strategy, they believed in deterrence of numbers. Misplaced, but that's a fact. Gulf War mein, they say, they looked at Gulf War very closely. There's a book called Unrestricted Warfare by 2 PLAF. Incidentally, they are Air Force colonels who wrote about unrestricted warfare. That changed China's outlook to warfare and how it looked at air power. China set about changing on how it will enhance its air power. Has done it systematically, and I give it enormous credit to its strategic outlook and the way it planned and went about upgrading its air force. So the fact is, we know what 5th generation is. They are modern capabilities. Basically, we are all aware, 1st generation, 2nd generation. These are all technology definitions, benchmark of a fighter plane, of any aerial platform actually, but usually associated with fighter planes and possibly bombers. So इसमें क्या होता है, the higher the technological benchmark, that means higher the generation, you expect more and more modern day capabilities and future capabilities packed into it. Electronic warfare, self-defense capabilities, stealth capabilities, long-range capabilities, efficient engineering, low radar signature, low thermal signature, ability to carry weapons internally, long unfueled range. So these are no definite benchmarks, but amongst what is prevalent, that is how. So our fighter fleet is about 4.5 generation. And fourth generation gets upgraded a little bit. You can, like I said, you can make it 4.5 generations because some modern changes you can do along the way. But हर एक fighter की एक limit होती है of how much of modifications you can do on it. Fifth generation fighters are the ones which are currently, a lot of them are in use. It started off with the F-22, the F-35, the Chinese versions. The Russian Su-57 technically is a 4.5 generation fighter, though in some cases they consider it fifth generation as well. So these are amorphous. The point is, it is the capability of the platform. Hindustan ke liye, it is not just about fifth generation. Certainly, it is about fifth generation when it comes to the need to upgrade your inventory ka profile. But हमारा ज़्यादा problem है the inventory of numbers जो हम fill नहीं कर पा रहे हैं. 20 साल हो गए. That number matters, especially when you see the numbers increase of the PLAF and the PAF and qualitative increase. So from fourth generation fighters, PAF will already get a fifth generation fighter even before our first fifth generation fighter starts flying. By the time our fifth generation fighter goes into mass production 10 years later, by then you will have Chinese sixth generation fighter already operational in Tibet. So we have already lost the advantage. But where the advantage we can neutralize a bit is fill the numbers quickly with high-end platforms as within whatever is available. It does not matter. देखिए, weapon choice I will not subscribe to. Every country has its plus and minus. आप France जाइए, आप Russia जाइए, आप US जाइए. So at the end of the day, every platform we have taken has been out of geopolitical compulsions driving the purchase or driving your choices of purchase. So जो भी हम choice करेंगे will be a geopolitical choice for the nation. So it is not just the Indian Air Force's choice. This we must get clear. But the point is, whatever be the choice, my only request is to the policy makers is make that choice quickly. Find ways and means to start filling this gap of numbers so that it is not a bucket जिसका आप जितना भी पानी डालते जाओ level कम होता जा रहा है because छेद बड़ा हो गया है.
जी.
That is the point we need to remember. So that is one aspect. Other aspect is on technology. We have to find ways and means because हमारे research and R&D, we are a long way behind. Fact is, we are behind in this, but it needs the government to recognize it and now take active top-down measures to improve it. Air Force can't do it alone. It's as simple as that. And the last question, most important, Chinese, PAF, Turkey, China. I've been saying, apart from the strategic partnership, China and Pakistan has been carrying out joint Air Force exercises since the year 2011 called Exercise Shaheen. Fact of it is, Pakistan's aviation industry, Kamra Aerospace Complex, is standing and thriving because of active Chinese support right through. They have built platforms together. Yes, Pakistan does the lower end of the scale, tech scale, in the sense that it does the airframe work, but the engines and the specialist equipment come from the Chinese. So it's a perfect trade-off. So the JF-17 is a product of that. So there has been active engagement of the Chinese aviation industry with the Pakistani aviation industry to make it a robust aviation industry, which both are invested in, and as well for the future. Now it is diversifying. What is the important thing to note is that operationally 2011 से ये दोनों देश हर साल almost to 2023 तक they have done 11 exercises together. 11 or 10, I forget the exact figure. And the last exercise in 2023, I think Shaheen 11, if I'm not wrong. key aspect was interoperability of their platforms. So they have flown JF-17s and ZDKs cross-paired as well and flown. So it is a back, you scratch my back, I scratch your back situation. Perfect. The Chinese are getting expertise in tactics, training, operational skills, operational modern day combat operational employments, and intelligence on Indian air power. Pakistan is benefiting from the Chinese supply chain, from their weapons, from their expertise. Turkey has jumped into this game in an entirely different perspective. It is a nation, their leadership is very centered on his own survival and his being, but he is playing smart geopolitics. देखिए, टर्की नेटो के साथ बहुत दिन से रहा इन द होप ऑफ बीइंग एक्सेप्टेड इन द यूरोपियन यूनियन. यूरोप ने क्या किया? इस्लामिक नेशन है, इसने टर्की को नहीं लिया ईयू में बट नेटो में लिया. दैट मींस आई विल यूज योर मिलिट्री बट आई विल नॉट absorb you in the economic fora of the European Union. So Turkey at some point took a decision 2000 mid 2010s में down the line and went its own way. And Erdogan became a strong man. It became a leader in an Islamic nation. So naturally, now there was coincidence with Pakistan and Turkey. So now it has become an alternative axis of power. Turkey has tasted blood in its weapon industry in Europe. Ukraine war में यहाँ पे एक और chance मिल गया. So because देखिए, it is both China and Turkey are benefiting. And in a strange way, even the US arms industry is benefiting. Because this has become live testing ground. You are getting the chap of combat proven equipment. So there will be a lot of myth building in this. But professionals, I'm sure the Indian Air Force and all professional people who watch air power will go into more details and put the two aside and get into specifics.
Of course.
So you're right. In a way, it is China and Turkey's war as well.
I mean, lastly, sir, how do you see the response, the global response? Leave alone that you're from the Indian Air Force, but as a professional, as a professional Air Force veteran who will probably in the due course, Sage, you will be interacting with many other people from around the world. आप seminars करते हो, ये करते हो, वो करते हो. So there's always the backdoor discussions that happen, Air Force to Air Force. Yeah, what do you guys do? That is there. So what do you think will be the Air Force reactions of the world when they see what we've done? There are two reasons why I'm asking this, and one is the power and capability
frankly,
of projection. One is that, sir, and the second point is about basically bringing something down. Everybody used to say air power is not a war-winning weapon. It has to be a combination. And I still believe that it has to be a combination. But here is an example where air power has actually brought about an event change probably in an operational scenario. So how would you kind of see this, and how would the world see this going forward?
Okay. Two important points. I think you two questions in the questions you asked. Two important points, Anuj. One is very interestingly, and I'm glad you asked this question, because now this question is a question of air power concepts, how other air forces look at Indian Air Force professionally. And second question, I think what you asked about is that on whether air power truly is war-winning entity by itself, or what is it? There are questions on that. So I'll answer both these questions separately. Indian Air Force's professional capability, we were the ones who underestimated ourselves, like I think most Indians do. We underestimate our own capabilities. But the real fact of it is that every time our officers went abroad, for any courses abroad, and earlier days there were not very many courses. Okay, every time we send our officers abroad, they invariably did brilliantly. They topped the course, broke records, phenomenally. Because we've seen one thing: Indians have a fantastic ability to work hard. And we understand another thing important we must bear in mind is that we've always had problems of adequate wherewithal. We were always short of adequate wherewithal. So we were always making do. We mastered the art of doing the best we can always with whatever little we have. It's a national mentality. You see our family structures the way they are. It's incredible. So that is a very strong aspect. So till we started going abroad in larger numbers for international exercises, or till other air forces started coming, COPE India, which occurred in Gwalior, was defining. The US Air Force came and went back having learned a tough lesson of having been bested by what they considered a third world air force those days. We were looked at a third world country. Fact of it is. So they were surprised. I have led a team to Red Flag in Ellis, in the real Red Flag, not the one in Alaska, which they do with allies. This is the main Red Flag where they only do it with their, simply put, near and dear ones. Yes, they opened it out to us because we were bringing the Sukhois, and that was an enormous thing for them. But what happened? Again, we underscored the same thing. We were limited in a lot of ways. It was a Russian platform. It didn't plug into the larger architecture and network which the US was flying. So we are always again tied with our hands behind. We didn't have full situational awareness of the fight. But we built it up with our mental agility. Enormous. So it's only when we started doing international exercises that the world got a taste of truly the Air Force's capability. We never made a hoo-ha about it, ever. We are this, we are that. You see, not a single, even now when we go for training for this exercises, unlike I'm saying here, there's a problem we have. We don't advertise what we do or project what we do well enough, as much as well as probably the Navy certainly and the Army does it. It's a fact of life. We are lousy at it. But you will find the focus is only on the meat of the matter. So we always took away the best of the exposure and our exposure to the world, adapted it to our platforms and weapons, fought them on equal terms, and at many occasions came out better. So that speaks volumes for our professional approach. So if anything IAF has in spades, it may be short of platforms, weapon systems, capabilities, capacities. What it had in spades is professional capability and an ethos which nurtures this independent, young aggressiveness and professionalism. So that has been the staying power. So for the first time, we have done something. See, the Western pedagogy, Westerns are writing as a study of air power internationally is been West-driven. You always had US Air War College or UK RUSI or French National Defense College University coming out with papers and theoretical aspects. Indian writers never found credence. Nobody even bothered to study Indo-Pak wars. 1971 is a masterpiece of a short, swift war. 14 days. Look at the scale, what was achieved, and we came out clean. That hasn't happened anywhere in the world, but the least studied war. So Air Force, we suffered the same. Now people have suddenly woken up and said, bloody hell. So now there will be greater interaction, I'm sure, air power professional interaction at a higher level. There will be greater credence built up into this whole. People will know more. We will learn more. There'll be more research and into what we have done, more examination of what we have done, And my sincere hope is it's not about making Air Force number one, which is the second part of your question. It is about making Air Force a go-to force along with all other elements of national power. Go to it right in the beginning, see what it has to offer. What occurred here is contextual. We fought in the manner under the certain context with certain restrictions, with certain defined aims and objectives. Every conflict will have a different game plan, different parameters. Air Force adapts to each and will fight differently in each. And this is the challenge in integrating air power, understanding and integrating air power. So this is something the other services have to understand so that they can leverage air power for their service aims. One, their service aims, because see, at the end of the day, every service has its own core competency. Joints, हर चीज में joint नहीं होता. Army has its core competency, Navy has its core competency, Air Force has its core competency. Yet, there are also areas where these three come together for a joint application of force in the ratio of involvement which will be dictated by the circumstances of the conflict you are going to go in, not by the size of a service. So that is what I'm saying. This is the difference thing we need to bring into our matrix, that we have to plan for future conflicts in war, each in its own context. So you need agility, flexibility of that. Other part you said, Air Force, it is a force which brings enormous amount of options in the response matrix of a nation in its defense. Point is, you look at it at a stage much later in your security assessment. Most security assessments are seen from land-centric perspectives of border, territorial. So you come to Air Force later. But today, where the warfare has reached your homes, it is no longer about an army or an Air Force keeping the enemy at the border. दुश्मन तो आ चुका है घर में. आप जाते हैं, सिक्योरिटी चेक होता है, आपका पूरा तलाशी लिया जाता है. आप मॉल जाइए, पिक्चर देखने जाइए, गार्डन में जाइए, ट्रेन पे चढ़िए. It's an accepted way of life. So the point is, the threat is already inside. So this is a different threat. So how we use air power, this is one example in Ops Indu. It is not the whole repertoire of the Air Force. So Air Force will certainly in some cases can make effects and changes, but in a different way, most certainly the army will make an effect and change depending on the context of that fight. That is the point I'm making. But the final line I will leave you with is that you cannot not bring Air Force on board on the table from the minute you have a situation in hand. How much you can use it, leverage it, that is situational. But don't discount it or bring it later when your options are now limited. That is the point.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point. Very, very important point. So this has cleared a lot of things. Let me just say thank you so much for the time, and I hope this is not one of the last interactions. This is one of the beginning of the journey of us learning about the Indian Air Force. क्योंकि हमको सीखना पड़ेगा sir, हमको understand करना पड़ेगा. And as you said in the beginning, and I'm going to take your words with your permission, कि यार अभी game खत्म नहीं हुआ है. Operations are still on. We are still in a war type situation, which is a gray zone. And the sooner the country realizes it that we are fighting this war, and the better it is. And सबसे ज़्यादा मेरा तो my humble regard and my appreciation for all the startups that are coming up in the country to support and to kind of play the next role in terms of the defense aviation. And kudos to everybody, including the Indian Air Force, for actually just depending on our own systems to put the game forward. We just need a lot more of that. And I know right now there's a hashtag trending. I'm going to say it very clearly. Hashtag fund the Kaveri. So we need money and we need this Atmanirbharta to become our motto and value. Sir, once again, thank you so much. A pleasure talking to you. Audience, I would really request your comments and your reactions to what sir has said. Namaskar, Jai Hind, Jai Bharat.
Thank you, Aadi, and thank you to all the listeners of Dev Talks. And I'm sure, Aadi, this was just the beginning and not the end of our interactions. Thank you very much.